Hello girls, this is the introduction to our first chapter that we'll be studying, and this is an introduction to biology. Now I'm sure you've heard of biology and have some idea what it is, and if you look at the word it kind of suggests what it's all about. Of course, bio, it means sort of living things, and ology is the study of things. There's all sorts of ologies, as you know, meteorology, anthropology, etc. What's alive? Well, lots of things are alive, but not everything. The chair you're sitting in, perhaps right now, not alive, of course. But all these guys, all these things, birds, and a fox, and people, and mushrooms, fungi, insects, frogs, bacteria and such, all alive. Now, what are the characteristics of living things? What are some of those things? Can you think of them? Let's see. Well, first of all, they have an organization, and that organization consists of at least a single cell. You have to have a cell to be considered alive. There's organization within the cell, as we'll see later, and the organization of multicellular organisms has a relatively ordered pattern, as you can see in this Elodea, this aquatic plant. We have some of this in the fish tank, and we'll look at that under the scope a little later. You can see this nice rows of cells. Living things, what do? They respond to their environment, to stimuli. So, for example, what do you do when you get cold? Well, you might put on a sweater, but also you might shiver. We'll talk about why your body does that. And if it gets hot, you start sweating. So living things respond to their environment. Homeostasis. Homeostasis is the way, or is the way we respond to our environment. It's our body attempting to maintain sort of constant conditions. Maintaining homeostasis is maintaining those constant conditions. A good analogy is the heating system in your house that we'll talk about in class, and how you have a thermostat that kicks on, say now in the summer when it gets too hot, to cool it down, but then it turns off once the temperature comes down. It just doesn't keep cooling your house until it's like a refrigerator. So maintaining relatively constant conditions, homeostasis, that's important for living things. What's metabolism? It's all the chemical reactions going on inside of you, and it's the way it's part of the way your body maintains homeostasis is through those chemical reactions. Digesting food, making certain types of proteins to build up certain structures in your body. These are all parts of your metabolism. Photosynthesis in plants is part of their metabolism. There's a silly picture of your metabolism. Now, we'll talk about this in class. These are the formulas you can use to calculate your metabolism. It gives you a rough idea of basically how many calories you need in a day, depending on how active you are and stuff like that. The characteristics of living things. We'll go over this in more detail in class, but we see, of course, we already talked about cells and organization. Responding to stimuli, homeostasis, metabolism. Growth and development. Living things, even if you're a single cell like a bacteria or a protozoan, you grow and develop through time. And we can see in these pictures these different organisms and how through time they go from this embryonic state to sort of a newborn state to an adult state. And there's lots of changes that occur, of course, through time. And living things have to reproduce. If your species is going to persist, you have to make more of your kind. And of course, there's all different ways of reproducing, asexually, sexually, etc. But all living things have to reproduce. Now, another part of this chapter we'll discuss in class and through some activities is the process of science. And I'm sure you've heard of this, the scientific method, right? Where first you make observations. Either out there in the field you see something, or you read something and it brings up what? A question. Why is such and such happening? Why does that bird do what it's doing? Why do these bacteria grow so well under certain conditions, etc. And we'll talk about wildcats in class. Well, what do? From that question, you come up with a hypothesis. What's that? Well, sometimes it's described as your educated guess as to the outcome of, or the answer to that question. It's what you think is going to be the answer to that question, based on some sort of previous knowledge you might have. Now, your hypothesis, as we'll see in class, is worded in a particular way, and there's a dependent and independent variable. The independent variable is the variable or variables that you're, as the experimenter, you're manipulating, and dependent variables are the ones you're sort of measuring. You're seeing how they change based on the experiment you're carrying out. There it is. Yes, of course you have to do an experiment to help answer your question, to see if your hypothesis is correct or not. Experiments have certain characteristics. Good experiments have certain characteristics. We'll talk about these in class. We'll see you have to have a control group. Do you remember what a control group is, perhaps? You have at least one or sometimes multiple experimental groups. And replication. What's that? It's important. Collect data, of course. Analyze that data. Come to a conclusion. And you're seeing, is the hypothesis that I formed supported by the data or not supported by the data? If it's not supported, you go back to the drawing board and redo your experiment, perhaps change it to see if you can come up with another way of answering the question. Now, if you're practicing science as a profession, you're at a university or some corporation as a scientist, then you'll typically want to publish your results, get the results out there so that others can read them and see them, and then you can get some sort of notoriety in your field for being a good scientist. Now, I'll talk about this a bit more in class, but for right now I want you to think of the difference between a hypothesis and a theory. Hypothesis and a theory. The term theory has different meanings if you just use it out there in general versus if you're using it in the realm of science. Okay? So think about that. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little introduction. I'll see you in class. Thanks. Bye-bye.